some estimates of the startups in India. It is a growing presence. We are the third largest startup hub globally. We have 19,000 plus tech and digital startups and over $10 billion investments likely to accrue by 2020. And we also believe that the unregistered startups, which are equally relevant, could be even more. The employment potential is 80,000 plus employment potential, strong momentum. There would be additional employment generation and additional startups that would be created over the years. However, 60% of the startups are in the e-commerce companies or aggregator space. The good thing is that there is a youthful population that is founding and establishing these kinds of startups. 72% of the startup founders are less than 35 years old, but alarmingly only 9% are women. We need higher gender diversity in startup revolution. So, this is the employment potential that has been projected by a KPMG study. 2012, we had just 23,500 employees in the e-commerce space, which comprised 4 principal sectors: logistics, warehousing, technology and others. And today's expectation is that logistics would have the highest employment, 800,000, followed by warehousing 250,000, technology 300,000 and others at 100,000. Therefore, the overall 1.45 million additional employment target looks feasible. These are the clusters which are there in India relating to e-commerce. We have got several clusters which have populated across India. There are 4 color schemes. One color scheme describes clusters which are 10 or low. 10 to 30 clusters are shown in blue color, 30 to 50 in violet and above 50 in maroon. These clusters are 400 in number across India. They contribute 40% to industrial output and 35% to direct exports. There are approximately 2,000 rural and artisan based clusters in India, and these clusters contribute 60% of manufactured exports from India. Now, if we superimpose on this the entrepreneurship driven startup model, and if the new age startups acquire the same level of scale and dispersion as the traditional MSME sectors firms have achieved over the last 4 decades of industrial development, we can conclude that the employment potential due to entrepreneurship would be really huge and immense. Therefore, the need to ensure that the startup clusters which are now localized or at best 10 centers in India, primarily the capital cities, is further diffused into Tier 2 cities. For example, Visakhapatnam and Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh, Trivandrum and Kochi in Kerala, then Mysore and Bangalore, then Nagpur, Baroda, Bhopal, Indore and such other Chandigarh and such other places all over India. So, the more clusters we will get for startup activity in future mimicking the growth of MSMEs, the greater would be the impact due to the entrepreneurship development in the employment arena. So, to sum up, we have these statistics. 18,861 startups were recognized by DPIIT as of 31st March 2019, and out of these 16,105 startups have reported the number of jobs they have created, and they say that 187,000 direct jobs were created by them. So, the implied rate is that each startup creates 11 direct jobs, and each direct job leads to 3x indirect jobs as per an estimate prepared by DPIIT. Therefore, the total jobs, both direct and indirect, out of startups is 560,000. We have MSMEs which are 1100 lakhs in terms of the overall number. We have startups here which are 16,100 reporting 560,000. Now, if this 16,105 startups scale up to lakh levels and million levels, the employment potential that would accrue would be phenomenal, and that is what the goal of economic development and startup development should be in Indian situation. Every month about 800 startups get recognized. That means one startup is getting established every hour in the country, and if this increases to say one startup per every half an hour, and later on for level of one startup even every 1 minute, the potential for startup employment potential in the country is very high. In 2016, the center had established a rupees 10,000 crore fund of funds, which is administered through certain nodal financial institutions, SIDBI being one of them. Out of this, 2,750 crores had been committed on 45 venture funds, catalyzing investments of more than 25,000 crores. What this fund of funds does is to act as the seed investment to trigger additional capital inflows to fund startups. Again, only 244 startups received the funding. If all the 18,000 startups and hopefully the 180,000 startups and 1 million startups that would be established in years to come, they also have funding support, the impact on wealth generation and employment potential could be huge. We will also go from the macro statistics to micro statistics. We will see the Indian unicorns in the startup space and their employment potential. So, this table, which is in three slides, traces the Indian unicorns, the businesses they are in, the industry they serve, the valuation they have received, the year founded, and the year they have become unicorns in terms of valuation and the employee strength. InMobi is a B2B enterprise platform for marketers. It is the first B2B company probably in India which has reached the unicorn status. It was founded in 2007 and got unicorn valuation in 2014. It employs 1500 people as per the source link which we have. Ola, which is a ride-sharing taxi food delivery service which serves the transportation industry, received a valuation of $6.2 billion and has reached an employee strength of 6,000. But when we compare that to Flipkart, which is an online store which was established around the same period, 2007, it received a valuation of $22 billion and employee strength of 30,000. So, the employment potential of e-commerce, a B2C operation versus a B2B operation is very evident that it is not for. So, the movement of funds to B2C has certain logic. The logic being the coverage of market, a large 1.3 billion population market in the quickest possible way with a new business model supported by a new technological platform. That is the one which attracts funding, and the scale up also produces huge number of jobs, much more than what a B2B company provides. However, the objective must be to have more B2B companies, because B2B companies and B2C companies are not in competition with each other. They serve different objectives and they create different kinds of jobs, and these spillover as well as cascading effects are quite different in respect of both B2B companies and B2C companies. So, what we need to have is to have more service companies, more digitally enabled service companies for greater employment generation, but also more B2B technology based hardware and strong software companies which also create new jobs of different kind and help probably higher export orientation of the entrepreneurial space. And when that happens, we will find that the indirect job potential of B2B would be even higher in terms of modernizing, digitizing the established industry structures, and therefore the overall employment potential could be higher than the model which we see today. Some more examples here. Freshworks Enterprise Software, it has an employee strength of 2000. Then we have Pine Labs, which is a merchant payment platform with a valuation of $1 billion, has an employee strength of 2000. Policybazaar, which is an insurance plan aggregator, operates in the financial service industry, has an employee strength of 10,000. But the ones which strike our eye are Swiggy and Zomato, which are food delivery companies. As I alluded to earlier, they have the maximum employment potential. Swiggy has 218,000 people connected to its employment potential engine, and Zomato has 237,867 employees as per the statistics provided. So, the potential and sustainability of consumption linked operations in the entrepreneur space are immense and huge, and they need to be sustained, they need to be grown. But there would be more such opportunities, there would be more such technology oriented ventures that could happen in B2B space as well. Logistics is getting the positive impact of digitization. We have delivery, Rivigo, they are getting into the logistics space, digital logistics space, and they have high employment potential of 40,000 in respect of delivery and 3,200 in respect of Rivigo. So, we have overall 27 unicorns which are in India with a total valuation of $90 billion and the total employee strength of 6.34 plus lakhs. The companies have been valuated significantly high based on the market potential the companies have, independent of the profit potential, but the employment potential that has been generated of the Indian unicorn story is substantial. What we need to see is not only the expansion of Unicorn Club, but also the expansion of the Unicorn Club into B2B as well. We also need to see the Unicorn Club moving into the other technology driven areas, not merely into e-commerce or delivery and transportation operations, but into healthcare, education, social infrastructure, cloud and various other product specific developments, including let us say robotics and other areas. So, these individual specific company centric examples point to the employment potential that accrues to the nation out of startup activity. Therefore, there can be no two opinions that startup movement, Startup India, Stand Up India and the startup revolution are essential to kickstart the employment capability of the nation to a completely different higher trajectory. But the goal should be to have the kind of dispersion and diffusion and entrenchment that the MSME sector has as well. And when the Indian startup, new age startup system acquires that level of national spread and also the entrenchment in terms of sustainability along with scalability, the employment potential also would be high, and the vicissitudes of employment of young firms having high employment potential and then dropping off the employment map after a few years based on failure rate and then again picking up, those things will be moved away from the employment situation. That should be the goal. And probably one last thought we should have is that technology is commonly seen to be destructive of established employment. On the other hand, research points out to the fact that technology has enabled always greater employment. Mobile telephony and telecommunication, for example, have led to greater entrepreneurship, and they brought people into the mainstream of technology and consumption and supply generation. If the e-commerce platforms are able to are willing to connect thousands and lakhs of rural artisans into their selling network, then there will be inclusive development of larger numbers of people. Similarly, when fintech operations get extended all across the nation and more importantly across rural areas, and when mobile money, mobile banking, mobile payment and even mobile loans are enabled by the mobile revolution, the impact on large scale employment is very real, and that has been proved to be real and true in respect of Kenya, for example. So, if you take mobile phones as an as a technological wonder that has happened in the industrial space over the last 15 years or so. They have fundamentally reduced information asymmetry. They made information a perfectly available input across all levels of society and across all sections of society. So, mobile phones have helped reduce information asymmetry. It has enhanced connectivity. It has enhanced productivity. It improved service delivery beyond imagination. It has had positive impact on young and middle-aged persons, on their ability to get into mainstream technological activities. And in the overall, mobile phones have improved market efficiency, and probably this is not the end of the road for mobile phones. New chapters are likely to be opened, how mobile phones will be helping in diagnosing the health and well-being of a person, how mobile phones would be acting as personal companions, analyzing data, analyzing information, and helping people achieve higher levels of productivity and intellectual acuity. So, these developments are bound to take place. So, if mobile phone alone is one technological wonder which has created a huge level of transformation in the market space, various other devices that are likely to come about in various industry verticals, and many of them we have discussed in the earlier modules, from human body imaging to robotics and to drones and various other capable technological ventures. The impact in terms of enhancing productivity and employment potential of the society is indeed huge. So the growth of different firms is likely to be made more synergistic and more sharp based on the fundamental new developments that take place. As an example, without mobile phones, the ride handling and the food delivery industries would not have grown the way they have grown. Similarly, when you have better diagnostic systems, the healthcare system will be able to better allocate its funds to prognosis rather than diagnosis. Today's emphasis is on diagnosis, but when we have more genetic devices which are going to occur in the marketplace, then you have more of prognosis of what's going to happen rather than post facto diagnosis of what has happened. So that's a fundamental change, and when that fundamental change happens, billions of dollars of healthcare expenditure will be saved and re-optimized in terms of more urgent and pressing needs of development. The same would occur for agriculture. We talked about in the earlier module how the moisture requirement of individual plants could be measured by sensors, and the drawal of water from the ground tables and the dispensing of water to the agricultural fields could be optimized. We also discussed how a circular economy could be provided based on the technological improvements in various usage patterns of different kinds of products. Therefore, there is great potential for enhancing the economic development as also employment generation by adoption of newer technologies. The linkage between entrepreneurship and employment is real, but it is layered. The layering occurs in terms of formal employment, in terms of informal employment. The layering occurs in terms of formal entrepreneurship and self-employed entrepreneurship. It occurs in terms of highly independent, risk-taking entrepreneurship, which we see as entrepreneurship, versus soft-supported employee entrepreneurship. Layering occurs based on the regions where the entrepreneurship takes place. The layering also occurs because of the business cycles and their impact on large companies as also on the small companies. The layering occurs also because of the nexus between the large firms and the small firms, the mutual relationship. A completely different type of layering occurs when the new age entrepreneurship enters the MSME field instead of just threatening or disrupting the large scale companies. How does the MSME sector cope with the digital technologies that are likely to be introduced by new age entrepreneurial firms? And finally, the orientation of technology in the generation of employment in terms of B2B versus B2C. All of these layers together contribute to the employment situation that arises out of entrepreneurship. So there is no single policy that is likely to help. It has to be industry specific, it has to be technology specific, it has to also take into account mutual interrelationships between different industries and between different types of technologies, see the convergence impact as well as the divergence impact, and plan a policy framework that optimizes the technological and scientific strengths and the passion for growth that India has got, so that we have a completely optimized employment plan arising out of entrepreneurship. We have many data points on entrepreneurship in terms of growth, valuation and other exciting parameters, but we need deeper research data points related to the relationships between entrepreneurship and employment, and making sure that we have a comprehensive policy that targets entrepreneurship and employment in a synergistic fashion. We have considered that technology provides more employment opportunities, but let's dwell on that subject a little more. Truly, technological developments transform industries and in that process do threaten incumbent firms. But they also add new startup firms, provide new entrepreneurial opportunities which can create new jobs. So the way I see the whole paradigm panning out is that there are emerging technologies coming up always which require basic skills, products, components and services. But that leads to the second phase of this paradigm, which is retooling and re-equipping. Skill development, product upgrades, service upgrades happen because the existing industry is too vast and too deep to be written off immediately. So the industry tries to reinvent itself. But at the same time, the disruptive nature or the power of emerging technologies is so impressive and so overwhelming that eventually new products, new components, new services and new industries come up. That is when the industrial transformations take place. The key point to note is that these industrial transformations are not all too sudden and they are unlikely to be too catastrophic just over a point of time. Rather, they are slow in the making. They give us 5 to 10 years of lead time to do some advanced planning and for industries to re-equip themselves, which could be either by retooling, re-equipping or by going in for the newer technologies. Therefore, there is an overlapping phase of bringing in the new technologies and also phasing out the available technologies. So, this gives us enormous opportunity, enormous flexibility to plan our employment scenario. So, when you look at entrepreneurship in industrial transformations, I can think of 4 ways this would happen. One, as I said, the emerging nature of technologies, and second, the tentative nature of big firms. The big firms tend to be little cautious and little conservative as also prospective in trying to understand how these new technologies will impact. So, that provides the nature of entry for the new entrants. Then there is this need for reskilling, and then finally, whatever said and done, when you look at a country such as India, you have a huge population base of 1.3 billion. So, how do we serve this entire population in one go with newer technologies? Therefore, when you look at industrial transformation, yes, it is ideal for startups, medium scale, small scale, micro enterprises. It also provides a lot of potential for new entrants. It also requires the existing industry to reskill, re-equip itself. But at the same time, how does this industrial transformation can cover overnight the entire population spectrum? So here lies this opportunity to actually optimize the employment paradigm with industrial transformations. For example, when we look at the smartphone situation, despite the massive upgrades in technology that has occurred over the last 15 years or so, the basic feature phone continues to be in existence and continues to be relevant for significant members of our population. Therefore, there is this coexistence of established incumbent technology as also the emerging new technology. But all said and done, these emerging technologies are very useful and very appropriate for startup movement and entrepreneurial movement. I have taken here an example of the pharmaceutical, more relevant probably biopharmaceutical is the appropriate way to look at it. So, when you look at that, we have got at least 100 firms which are operating in the genomics and regenerative medicine area, that includes CAR-T, mRNA, gene therapy, CRISPR, artificial organs and drug discovery. And drug discovery is increasingly more biological in nature than synthesis based drug discovery research. Then we also have over 200 digital technology bio startups, and that includes digital therapeutics, artificial intelligence in healthcare, virtual reality in healthcare and nanomedicine. Then we also have 100 robotic and bioengineering startups, which include companies which are looking at 3D bioprinting, bionic prosthetics and exoskeletons, medical biosensors and medical robotics. These ventures, about 400 of them which I have summarized, have garnered multi-billion dollar investments, and there are several others which have received smaller amounts of investment. They have generated, let us say, 100,000 direct and indirect jobs, apart from the supportive laboratory infrastructure and research infrastructure. So, emerging technologies are ideal for startups, they create newer opportunities. But at the same time, these industrial transformations provide a lot of opportunity for new entrants in areas which are not hitherto understood. So, when you look at digitization, you have two aspects. One is the front end, where the industry is getting directly changed, but the other is the back end, which has been very silent, which is not seen. So, when you look at automobile design today, we have got thousands of jobs being done in the back end, and they are quietly amalgamating themselves with either the information technology corridors or other industrial clusters. So, when you look at digital back office, we have app development, data analytics, engagement tools for human resources and for people, learning platforms, digital design, blockchains. These are all the digital back office activities that are happening with the digitization. Similarly, when you look at the front end, the product, you have very specific components which have never been there but are required: a battery, a starter motor, inverter, charger, drive. So, when you have these kinds of things happening, you will require employment, and that employment is not something which is taken out of the existing employment. The existing employment continues, but the new employment happens in these newer areas. So, when I said that we have a population of $1.3 billion and when we have a population of 1.3 billion people and we cannot overnight transform this entire industrial service for this kind of population, you look at this case of automobile industry. We have got nearly 250 million vehicles of all types on the road, and even if we have electric vehicle transformation occurring, this part of the vehicles on road would continue to exist. They cannot be overnight changed to electric vehicles. Therefore, there is need for an industrial ecosystem that continues to service these vehicles to contemporary standards, better fuel economy, better fitness for purpose and better overall look and feel of the vehicles, which means that the existing factories which are probably depreciated could even be reconditioning factories or recertifying factories. Therefore, you have the existing infrastructure which would continue for a while, and that for a while could be 5 years, could be 10 years, even as the newer industrial transformations occur. So, this is the essence of the industrial transformation leading to higher employment rather than lower employment. Similarly, reskilling and the need for newer technologies and newer capabilities re-equips education sector itself. We need to have newer educational institutions, not only the existing universities expanding, but also new research institutions which look at emerging technologies, and also new liberal institutions, because the future can not be all science and technology. And they have going to lead to two types of vocational and skills streams. We already have vocational and technical institutions. They are expected to be even more upgraded as we go forward, whereas a completely newer brand of skill development corporations are likely to come into play. Therefore, the existing colleges the existing vocational and technical institutions and the existing universities, which are shown here in the violet color, are likely to be supplemented by a whole new paradigm of skill oriented and newer science and technology oriented institutions, and that provides additional employment opportunities within the educational sector, so that this educational sector can re-equip the entire workforce to newer capabilities. And from science and engineering oriented academic institutions to healthcare and medicine oriented teaching hospitals, I foresee that these industrial transformations will require establishment of more employment platforms. And also there is a fundamental change in paradigm. When we have the industrial revolution seen retrospectively, everything started small. There was a tentative phase of original equipment manufacturers coming in, the volumes were low, the component makers were not financially sound, they started in a tentative way, and the government incentives supported medium and small scale enterprises, and the flow of funds was essentially through a conservative and careful banking system. But today people understand that the size of the entity and the scale of investment, they need not be correlated linearly. In fact, the entity could be small, but the investment requirements could be much higher depending upon the nature of technology. Therefore, the investment community is willing to look at small scale enterprises which are capable of taking big strides in science and technology, as capable of being funded, as deserving of higher funding. So, that will take the paradigm of startups and entrepreneurial firms in this industrial transformation to an entirely new level. And industrial transformations which have so far been of developed nations are now becoming truly global, which means that liquidity will flow to wherever the startups are there in newer scientific and technological fields. I would also say that it is not the technology or the science which is emerging that is going to threaten the job. The jobs are likely to be threatened far more by bad management and far more by poor corporate governance. When you have bad management, you would have low quality in output, low safety in operating conditions, you would have low productivity, high wastage, and therefore low competitiveness. So, the capital input output ratio is going to be adverse, which means that $1 of investment you make is likely to produce, instead of $1.5 billion of value added output, you are likely to have 0.5. So, that is not a good thing for industrial job creation. Similarly, poor corporate governance, which we will talk about in future, is about excessive spending and investments, unsustainable and unprofitable growth, deliberate falsification of operations and accounts, which leads to non-performing assets, and finally collapse of companies. Jobs are going to get folded up if the companies have poor governance practices. So, more jobs are under threat with bad management and bad corporate governance than with newer and positive technological developments. These are very important point which we would need to look at, and that is where the startups which are in the forefront of bringing science and technology take the lead in making sure that the practices are upgraded alongside technological and other developments. So, to repeat again, good management, good science and technology, good governance, and prudential use of resources, this would lead to expansion of current and new jobs as we go forward. So, how would startups and entrepreneurial firms help? We don't need to look at only McKinsey, BCG or Bain & Company to improve our management habits and also governance practices. We can have boutique startup firms which can help managements with creative consultancy. Similarly, we can have compliance tools which are applicable for a number of companies, small, medium, large. We can also have startups update and revitalize existing technologies and firms. In the area of human resources, we have got digital startups which are helping companies focus on specific areas of work and engagement and also certain other work streams. And finally, startups help us convert emerging and futuristic technologies into commercial realities. So, given that we have a cycle of virtuous renewal and growth taking place all the time, improve, innovate, transform. That is the cycle which keeps happening. Today it looks very dramatic because we are in this phase, but when you look at the previous industrial revolutions 1.0, 2.0 and 3.0, from mechanical to electromechanical to software computer driven changes, these cycles have occurred, probably less discussed and less pedagogically presented compared to what it is being done now, but definitely this is the cycle that happens when you have improved technologies, upgrading skills. Jobs are actually protected rather than destroyed. Then you have new technologies requiring new skills and creating new jobs. So, the way we plan our employment paradigm is very important to ensure that the newer technologies are very gainfully employed. And to talk about this in a very macro and historical perspective, between 1820 and 2020, the population of the world has grown 8 times, from 1 billion to 8 billion. And you can also think of employment going up more in tandem rather than getting static. Huge number of employment opportunities, the two formal employment opportunities with better working conditions progressively have been created. And therefore, this gives us hope and confidence that as you have higher levels of technological upgradation, technological invention, the employment situation would only go up. Therefore, the startup firms, the entrepreneurial firms which are engaged in the technological revolution must pride themselves as being harbingers of not only change, but also greater employment opportunities. Thank you. We come to the end of this session.